Thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts football podcast, where we discuss the latest news, rumors, and games of the NFL and college football. As always, I'm Jeremiah, and we are back again with another action-packed show for you guys today. And we're going to talk about all things NFL scouting combine. And I think today is the last day. It would be defensive backs doing the drills, but all the drills started on Thursday. And most notably, Saturday was the day that everyone was talking about because John Ross, receiver of the Washington Huskies, broke Chris Johnson's 40-yard dash record. Chris Johnson's 40-yard dash record was set at 4.24 in 2008. John Ross, on Saturday morning, broke that record at 4.22. So, that is incredibly fast, my friend. That's incredibly fast. Well, you know, John Ross was projected to be a borderline first-round pick this year, and with this performance, with this 40-yard dash performance, I think he has emerged himself as a potential top 20, top 15. I don't see him as a top 10 pick. I just think there's way too much talent there. But he definitely did improve his draft stock. He did. And I think he is more than just a speedster. I think he's a really good receiver in general, honestly. I think he definitely can be a really great slot receiver. He had incredible numbers last year. Last season, he had 17 touchdowns. He had 1,150 yards and 81 receptions. So, his measurables were at 5'11", 190. That was his measurements on the roster last year. And, he may not be that outside receiver, but he can be a really good slot receiver. I think he can be like Deshaun Jackson. And Deshaun Jackson actually mentored John Ross. Because you remember, Deshaun Jackson he grew up in Long Beach. John Ross grew up in Long Beach as well. And, the two have connected because of that. But, when you look at them side by side, John Ross and Deshaun Jackson, they're both from Long Beach. They both had 22 receiving touchdowns in college. Deshaun Jackson measured at 5'9", 3/4 inches, and John Ross measured at 5'10", at 3/4 inches at the combine. So that was their measurements at the combine. The 40-yard dash time, Deshaun Jackson, of course, had 4.3, and John Ross had a 4.22. So, there's a lot of similarities between these two guys. Like I said, Deshaun Jackson has mentored John Ross. The two have worked out during the offseason. And, when they interview with ESPN's Marty Smith, John Ross said it was awesome to work with a pro player. And there's another story that ESPN College Game Day did on John Ross, and it was actually with Snoop Dogg. And John Ross used to play in Snoop Dogg's youth league when he was a child, and Snoop Dogg actually mentored Ross too. He saw the star potential in Ross. And I do think that a lot of people are going to, they're going to maybe overrate John Ross a little bit, but I think he has the skills to be phenomenal in the NFL. And John Ross literally broke Twitter for literally like half an hour. He did. But another thing that made headlines after John Ross broke the record was that he didn't win an island. And if you remember, I talked about this on last Wednesday, that Adidas was going to offer a the prospect, whoever broke the 40-yard dash record, they were going to offer that prospect a free island, their own island, but they had to do it in Adidas shoes. I think the new one, it was a 2017 Adi Zero cleat, and the prospect had to wear those shoes to break the record. If they broke the record in those shoes, Adidas would have gave them a free island. And John Ross, he didn't win that island because he was wearing Nikes. And he was actually asked about it by Michael Irvin on NFL Network, and he said that he just doesn't swim that well. He doesn't own a boat, so he had to run Nikes. So pretty much, I don't think John Ross really cares about winning an island at all. Sure, it may have been nice, but he said he doesn't know how to swim. He said he doesn't have a boat, so he has no use for it. So, I do like how he, how humble he was with, all this going on. But yeah, he was a talk of the town throughout the day on Saturday. And, he actually, I think Adidas signed Ross to a contract after this, because why not? You kind of just broke the record in your shoes. So when I think, heading to next year and heading to the draft, Ross is definitely I think he's going to be a first round selection. We've seen the numbers in college. We've seen how he is. And, he can get in space. He can definitely get yards after the catch. And with his 40 time, I do think he's going to be a top 15 pick. Sure, some people may think that may be reaching a little bit, but John Ross is just more than speedster. He can be a really good receiver. And I do think he can be a really good slot receiver on a really good team. I do think people or scouts or teams, I think they're going to draft him to be the number one guy. Maybe he can be the guy, who knows? But I still think that he can be a slot receiver, a really good one though, at best. He has the size, he has the speed, he has the catching ability. So I do think that he will be good in the NFL. And heading to his numbers here. Actually, before I head into the break here, John Ross actually didn't finish. He didn't do the rest of the drills after the 40 at all. Because why would you? You broke Twitter for like literally half an hour. Why would you do that? But he absolutely put on the show. He absolutely was the biggest winner of the weekend. And why wouldn't you? No one really expected anyone to break the record. Sure, I knew John Ross was fast, but I didn't know he was that fast. And John Ross actually got hurt running the 40, so that's part of the reason why he didn't really finish the rest of the day. But when you ran a 4.2, why would you finish the rest of the drills? I think you should be done. So, yeah, after John Ross was done with the 40-yard dash, he went home and completed the combine drills. He was done. His workout was done. And I do think that he was the ultimate winner of the weekend because, he was a borderline first round and second round pick. He was rated that high. He was the third best receiver prospect in many analysts' eyes. I still think he's the third best, but I do think with his 40 time, he's going to be definitely a first round pick. But what makes the 40-yard dash time more impressive is Ross's medical history. So in January 2015, Ross had to go to surgery to repair 2 meniscus tears in his right knee. He injured the knee again the following summer, and then he missed his entire junior season. He competed at the combine with the torn labium in his shoulder, and he's scheduled to have surgery on that shoulder on March 14th. So he was injured when he did this, and he actually got injured again while doing it. But I do think the fact that he will be fine, he has come back from these injuries before, and the fact that he's came from 2 meniscus tears and ran a 4.2, I think that says a lot about the work ethic of John Ross. All right, Ro, when I get back, I'm going to discuss Myles Garrett and the quarterback's performance of the NFL Scouting Combine. And man, what Myles Garrett just put on a show this weekend. I'll discuss Myles Garrett and the quarterbacks this weekend when I get back to the Going to Me Concepts Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the Going to Me Concepts Football Podcast, and the projected number 1 pick in this year's draft is Texas A&M defensive end or edge rusher, wherever you want to call him. Myles Garrett, he put on a show this weekend, and he proved that he deserves to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. Well, NFL, they compare Myles Garrett to Jadeveon Clowney, because remember when Jadeveon Clowney was entering the draft like 3 years ago, he was the no-doubter number 1 pick. So Jadeveon Clowney measured at 6'5", or 1/4, 266 pounds. His arm length was 34.5, and he ran a 40-yard dash of 4.5. Myles Garrett, little short at 6'4.5, a little heavier than Jadeveon Clowney at 272, and his arm length, or his length, is 35 1/4, and he ran a 40.46. So, honestly, the way that Myles Garrett performed this weekend, the Cleveland Browns would be foolish to pass on Myles Garrett. This is a guy that's probably going to be a Pro Bowler next year. He has that kind of talent. This guy can really contribute right away. He can possibly maybe turn this Cleveland franchise around. Maybe. I do think Myles Garrett is that type of player to literally turn around a whole entire franchise. He can maybe be like a J.J. Watt, maybe, but what I've seen from Myles Garrett running a 4.6, he even ran faster than some of the quarterbacks in this year's draft. He is a can't-miss prospect, and with 33 reps at 225 bench press, we knew he had the strength, so I was surprised by that. But running a 4.6 at 272 is impressive to me. And, I do think that if he avoids injury, I do think he can be a Pro Bowler in his first year. Because remember when Jadeveon Clowney entered the NFL, Clowney was hurt for his first 2 to 3 years. He finally put it all together this past season, put the injuries behind him, and he looked like the guy that Houston Texans drafted. Myles Garrett, if he avoids injury, I think he can be a Pro Bowler right away. And that would be huge for the Cleveland Browns. Because I'm telling you right now, if the Cleveland Browns, if they pass on Myles Garrett, there's no doubt in my mind that he won't go past number 2. Because if the Browns pass on Myles Garrett, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are going to draft Myles Garrett to San Francisco. There's no doubt. He would not go past number 2. So, honestly, the biggest question is, or the biggest thing that I should say, or I will say, is that the Cleveland Browns will be foolish to pass on Myles Garrett. How could you not pass on a guy that put on the show like this? 4.64 40-yard dash time, and that was his first attempt. And he ran better than most of the quarterbacks. You know, Deshaun Watson ran a 4.4. No, not a 4.4, a 4.6. So he put the top quarterbacks this year. So because NFL during the broadcast of the 40, they compared him to Deshaun Kaiser, Mitchell Trubisky, and Deshaun Watson, and he outran all of them. He beat Deshaun Watson by 2 points of a second. But man, that shows the type of speed this young man has. Garrett, man, and he had an impressive vertical jump at 41 inches. 41 inches, that is unreal. That is impressive. And, you know, a lot of scouts or a lot of analysts, they started to compare Myles Garrett to a lot of multiple big-time NFL defensive stars. For example, Myles Garrett was compared to the Marcus Ware of Dane Burglar of CBS Sports made the comparison of Myles Garrett and DeMarcus Ware. Myles Garrett had a 4.64. DeMarcus Ware had a 4.65. And DeMarcus Ware, when at his combine, he weighed at 251 pounds. Myles Garrett is 272, so he's at least 20 pounds heavier, and he was 1.2 faster. And, you know, NFL research, they broke down how he measured up in 4 different categories. So they compared the height of Myles Garrett to Julio Jones. Myles Garrett was 6'4.5". Julio Jones was 6'2 3/4". They compared Myles Garrett's weight to Rob Gronkowski. Gronkowski weighed in at 264. Myles Garrett weighed at 272. And the 10-yard split, Myles Garrett, his time of 1.63 seconds was faster than Devontae Freeman, who clocked in at 1.66 a couple years ago at the Combine. And, of course, the 40-yard dash time, you know, he clocked in at 4.6, and they compared his time to Jarvis Landry at 4.7. So they said that he was taller than Julio Jones, heavier than Gronkowski, quicker than Devontae Freeman, and faster than Jarvis Landry. And Jarvis Landry, I think he's a heck of a receiver too. Julio Jones, we all know about him. Rob Gronkowski has been the best tight end in the league when healthy. And Devontae Freeman has been a very important part of the Atlanta Falcons offense the past 2 years. So the fact that, you know, he was faster in different categories than some of the big-time NFL players says a lot. And I do think that, you know, with the way that he performed this weekend, the Browns cannot afford to pass on this guy. Honestly, though, the 4.6, I knew that, you know, that is impressive, but I was more impressed with the 41-inch vertical jump. That is insane. Myles Garrett showed that he is not a human. That is insane. The fact that to have an edge rusher that can jump that high, man, quarterbacks are not going to get those little quick checkdowns. And, of course, Garrett, he did have the upper body strength with 33 reps, and I wasn't surprised by that. But I do think that, you know, he really overwhelmed the scouts on Sunday. I do think he overwhelmed the scouts, and, you know, he was definitely, I think he was the top performer of the weekend. But there was a lot of top performers this weekend too. I did talk about John Ross at the beginning of the show, but we got guys like Solomon Thomas at Stanford, Jabril Peppers. He worked out with the linebackers and is set to do the DB workouts today. And Haasan Reddick at Temple. We had a lot of guys that improved their draft stock this weekend. But I will talk about those guys when I get back. And I know I was going to talk about the quarterbacks, but I'm going to talk about the quarterbacks in the next segment. And I'm going to talk about the winners and the losers of this year's Scouting Combine when I get back to the Going to Me Concepts Football Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to Going to Me Concepts Football Podcast. And some of the top performers of this weekend, or the most notable performers, I might add, were at the running back position. Leonard Fournette. He was a big story on Friday, mostly due to the weight that he measured in. He measured at 240 pounds. And what was most impressive about Fournette was that he clocked in a 40-yard dash time of 4.5 at 240 pounds. That was impressive to me. And yeah, some scouts said he may have been overweight, but a 4.5, that is absolutely astonishing to me at that weight. And, I do think that he will be the first running back off the board, partly due to what we have seen him accomplish at LSU and, the way that he performed at the Combine. He could have performed a little bit better, but I do think the fact that he ran a 4.5 at 240 is impressive in itself. And then other running backs the performance of other running backs in this year's class. Dalvin Cook ran a 40-yard dash time of 4.49. Christian McCaffrey ran a 4.48. So pretty impressive days from those guys. But the fastest time of any running back was North Carolina's TJ Logan, who ran a 4.37 on his second run of the day. So, Fournette, out of all the running backs, I think Fournette, he may have been the most impressive. He was faster than Dalvin Cook. He was faster than McCaffrey. Remember, those two guys are projected to be in the first round along with Fournette. So I do think Fournette did surprise a lot of people with that weight, but he clocked in a 4.5, and that was impressive in itself. Well, other performers that really stood out in my eyes was East Carolina's Zay Jones. I think he had a really good performance. I think it was a little bit overshadowed this weekend, partly due to John Ross breaking Twitter with his 40-yard dash time. But Zay Jones, he posted a 4.5, or I should say 4.45 40-yard dash time. I do think that was impressive. But remember, this is a guy that was really impressive in East Carolina's passing game. He was relied heavily on underneath routes. He set the FBS record with 158 receptions, and he did have 399 career receptions. So, his time was really questioned, but I do think a 4.4 is really going to help out. It's really going to help out his draft stock. So his 40 speed wasn't just the most important, most impressive portion of his workout. Jones finished in the top 5 among receivers in the broad jump, which at 11 inches and 1. He did have a short shuttle time of 4.01 and a 60-yard shuttle time of 11.17. So, I do think that Zay Jones' size, which is at 6'2" and 201 pounds, he can be a deep speed threat, and he can have a short area quickness that can make him a valuable option in the passing game. So Zay Jones can be a outside receiver and a slot receiver, and I do expect him to have his draft stock improve by the draft, by the time the draft comes. But I do think he'll be definitely in the second round, and if he doesn't, he'll be in the third round. So I do think he will be drafted in the first 3 rounds. And another impressive player from this past weekend was Solomon Thomas. Solomon Thomas had a really great combine. He's regarded, he's considered to be the second best pass rusher in this year's draft. Myles Garrett, of course, is the best one. But Myles Garrett, he did perform. He had probably the best combine performance of anybody this year. But Solomon Thomas, he did have impressive day as well. He had a 4.7 40-yard dash time. And, he showed off that speed. He showed off the quickness in that. And, the fact that Solomon Thomas had a 4.7, that, a lot of scouts were impressed by that. A 4.7 at 273, it was pretty good. And, that is literally like a 1 second below Myles Garrett, who ran a 4.6. So Solomon Thomas really did improve his draft stock with that 40 time. And, Thomas did record 40 reps in the bench press and 126 inches in the broad jump. So that ranked 5th among all defensive linemen. So he did help out his draft stock right there. And he can certainly be a top 10 pick by the time the draft comes. And I think another impressive player this combine this weekend was Haasan Reddick of Temple. He really improved his draft stock. He ran a 4.5. That was the best time all among defensive linemen. He eked past the 4.3 mark of Kansas State's Jordan Willis. So very impressive time from Reddick. And a lot of scouts and a lot of draft analysts there, they had Reddick among the top 20, top 30 prospects. And, a lot of people, a lot of these scouts and a lot of these analysts, a lot of these draft analysts, they might rank him up now because of that 40 time. So, he might rise up draft boards because of this. So, he was a first rounder. Now he can be possibly a mid-first rounder because of that time. And, Haasan Reddick, he's probably going to play linebacker at the next level. But with that kind of speed at linebacker, you cannot pass that up. And, of course, I can't let you guys go without talking about the quarterbacks in this combine. I think the most impressive quarterback at the combine was Deshaun Watson. I think he made his case to be the top quarterback taken in this year's draft. I think he won the day. I think he was the most impressive quarterback. He threw his targets on time. And, he doesn't have the arm strength of the Deshaun Kaiser, or he doesn't have that type of arm strength, but, he showed the accuracy there. He showed the really good ball placement in his workouts. He had a 4.6 40 time, I might add. And he ran a 4.66 at this year's combine. So, that was impressive as well. Mitchell Trubisky, He ran a 4.67, so he was slightly slower than Deshaun Watson. I do think that athleticism will have, I do think, with his 4.67 time, a lot of teams are going to be looking at that athleticism. So I do think that it was an underrated part of his game. So I do think that would rise him up in draft boards a little bit. But I don't think Trubisky would. I don't think he's going to be drafted in the top 10. He's definitely not going to be in the top 5. But I do think he can maybe be a late first rounder, early second rounder. And Patrick Mahomes, who's regarded as one of the top quarterbacks in this draft, he clocked in a 4.8. He also had an impressive day as well. And probably the most disappointing of all the quarterbacks was Deshaun Kaiser. He ran a 4.83. But, he, in his workouts, he really left. I feel like he could have done a little bit more. For the 3 impress of the 4 quarterbacks, the only one that was impressive was Deshaun Kaiser. Every step throw was evaluated as soon as he arrived at the combine. According to John Lynch, he blew the doors off in his interview, but from that point on, everything wasn't as executed. His workouts, they look pretty average compared to Watson, Mahomes, Trubisky. They looked average. And, when you're looking at his workouts throwing to receivers, we saw the big arm, but the receivers kind of had to slow down to catch the ball. So, he didn't have the perfect ball placement as, we saw from Watson, but I do see the potential there. And I do think the most crazy thing about this year's quarterback draft class is that all of these quarterbacks, all the top quarterbacks in this year's draft, Watson, Trubisky, Mahomes, and Kaiser, they all have high bust potential, but they all have really high potential being a starter in this league. So they're either boom or they're bust prospects. Like, they're going to be really great or they're going to be really bad. They're not going to be in between. So I do think that with Deshaun Watson in his workout, I do think that he will be the top quarterback taken. And I have said I think he's the top quarterback in this class, and there's no question about it. So, those are some of the most impressive performances from this weekend. So, we're literally like a month and I think like 7 weeks away from 7 weeks. Is it 7 weeks? I don't know. 7 weeks away from the NFL draft. So we will find out where these prospects will land. And of course, a lot of these prospects have to do the pro days. There's a lot of prospects that weren't invited to combine, most notably Joe Mixon. So we will see how he will do compared to the other running backs in this deep draft class. But before I go, I got to talk about Reuben Foster. He wasn't scheduled to do any of the workouts this weekend, but he was sent home early after being in a heated argument with a hospital worker at the combine on Friday. So he was sent home. So he didn't even get to meet with teams. He didn't get to do anything. Well, he wasn't going to do drills at the combine anyway because he is recovering from surgery, or I think he's in a sling. But yeah, he was not. He had to get sent home because of this argument. And there's a questions like, is this going to ruin his draft stock? No, he'll be fine. He wasn't going to do this. He wasn't going to do the drills anyway. But a lot of people are going to be like, oh well, is this going to question his character? Maybe, but honestly though, Reuben Foster can easily be the second pick in this year's draft. He's definitely a top 10 pick. Not top 10, but he is a top 10, but I do think he's going to go in the top 5. So Reuben Foster, his draft stock will not go down. And, there was this thing got a little blown out of proportion. League source said to ESPN that there was a miscommunication that allowed the argument between Foster and the hospital worker to escalate. Foster had been waiting for an extended period of time for what the NFL calls his pre-exam. He became impatient, and he began questioning a hospital worker. Then the hospital worker was not, he wasn't too kindly to Foster's words. And, Foster said nothing happened in a live Instagram post that he had on Saturday. But, Reuben Foster, he was recovering from a rotator cuff surgery in his right shoulder. He wasn't scheduled to participate in the drills anyways. So Foster, in the video on Instagram, he did say that he'll be out of the sling in a week. And, he said he's going to make himself available to speak with any team on Tuesday, the day before Alabama's Pro Day in Tuscaloosa. So Reuben Foster, he will be fine. His draft stock's not going to go down. No, I think this was something that overreaction a little bit, and I do think Reuben Foster will be. I do think he will be a top 5 pick in the draft, and there's a lot of teams that can really use a linebacker in that top 5, especially in that top 10. So I do think that he'll be fine. His draft stock's not going to go down, guys. This was a story that was blown out of proportion. Reuben Foster, probably he's going to be as high as number 2 in my opinion, but I do think he will be gone in the top 10. Well, that is going to conclude my show today, guys. I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. I will be back tomorrow discussing any type of news that I didn't get to talk about today and news that will happen in the next 24 hours. There's a lot I didn't get to talk about today because of the Combine. There's a lot to be talked about, a lot of storylines there. So I had to cover the Combine literally all today, and it does end tomorrow. I think the DBs are scheduled to work out. So, Jabril Peppers is the biggest name that will do workouts today, even though he did work for the linebackers. But I will discuss any type of news that happens over the next 24 hours. And all I have to say is thank you guys for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. And you guys come back tomorrow and see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.